New Ulm. My name is Linda Heine, and I will serve as moderator tonight for the Minnesota State Representative race for District 16B. These candidates are standing for election in the general election coming up on November 8th. The League has been a presence in New Ulm for 80 years. We are an active group of women and men who believe that democracy is strengthened when citizens become informed voters. We are a nonpartisan political organization encouraging informed and active participation in government. The League does not support political parties or endorse candidates. We do strive to influence public policy through education and advocacy. If this work is important to you, I invite you to pick up membership information on the back table or speak to any of the members present tonight who can be identified by their League buttons. Tonight's forum is being aired live on New Ulm Community Access Television and KNUJ AM. We request no taping or recording of this event other than by members of the media. And we ask that you please turn off your cell phones. We will begin with the candidates tonight providing introductory remarks for up to a minute and a half by each candidate. Following their introductions, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to a question that the League submitted to them in advance of this evening's forum. The forum is then going to be open to questions from the audience, including the listening audience and those present tonight, as well as those watching television from home. The questions may be written by those present in the room on index cards that are going to be passed out by our ushers. Please just raise your hand and reach out if you'd like if you need a card. If you're not here tonight present with us and would like to call in with a question, the phone number is 276-8591. The candidates will each be given 2 minutes to respond to each question, and each candidate will also be given a 1-minute opportunity for a rebuttal or further comment. We have timekeepers seated in the front row, and they will keep track of the amount of time the candidates are speaking, and they will indicate with the big red stop sign when it's time for them to quit. And we know, obviously, that the candidates are going to respect those limits. The questions are screened by League members. Questions on similar issues may be consolidated or rephrased. Questions that seem hostile, antagonistic, friendly, supportive, or of gratuitous content will not be accepted. The questions must be directed to pertinent issues of this elective office and not related to personal matters. All questions become the property of the League of Women Voters. If there's a question that a listener has that they feel has not been adequately addressed or which we did not have time tonight to address, we encourage all individuals, obviously, to contact their candidates directly. Once again, I'll give you the phone number to call in for questions, and that is 276-8591. We will now begin with our candidates for House District 16B. And I guess Mr. Torkelson will go with you first for the opening statements.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for putting this forum together. They've done this on a regular basis for a long time, as you noted, Linda, and it's great of you to do this work and inform the public of the district about our candidates and how we stand on various issues. So thank you to the League of Women Voters, and thank you, Linda, for moderating tonight's discussion. Before I go into my opening remarks, I was a little shocked and surprised when I picked up the paper actually on the way here this evening to see that Andy Lochner has passed away. Had a chance to work with Andy as he served on the county board here in Brown County. He has a long record of exemplary service to Brown County, and not only on the county board but also on the school board, and he will be missed. And I thank his family for all that they've done giving him up to do his work, and he will be missed, and I would like to express my personal sympathy to the family. As far as my opening remarks go, this is my fifth race. I've served 4 terms in the Minnesota House of Representatives. This is the 5th time I'm running for office. The first 2 terms, the district number was 21B and included part of Watonwan County where my farm is. Now the district number is 16B and includes my more recent residence on Lake Hanska. So That's all worked out very nicely. I still am farming. In fact, I was in the combine shortly before I took off to come here this evening, and I did find a little mud. So if you'd like to help me pull the combine out later, I'd appreciate it. I'm married to my wife, Cindy. Cindy is a retired elementary teacher. We celebrated our 36th wedding anniversary this summer. We have 2 daughters, and in fact, one of those daughters is getting married soon. Stop sign is up, so I will stop.
Okay, Mr. Grossenberg.
Thank you, Linda. A moment of silence for fallen friend. Thank you. When I began my campaign, I chose as my theme a better way to govern. We've all watched the politics of extreme partisanship that has prevented legislators from getting things done. Legislators have seemed more interested in blocking the other side's agenda than in doing what is needed for the people they represent. If I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I will work to find a better way to govern, one that focuses on getting things done, because the people in my district have needs. They have needs in providing for their children the strongest possible education. They have needs in caring for their elderly, ensuring that they can live their lives with dignity and respect. And they have needs in building a stronger economy through providing broadband to the countryside so our farmers and families can compete, supporting small businesses so our communities remain vital and alive. The people of this district have many needs like this, and my intention is to find a better way of governing that gets things done. That is why I'm asking for your vote in November. Thank you.
And we will proceed first with Mr. Grossenberg in responding to this question. If elected to this office, what would you most like to accomplish in your term as representative?
Thank you. There are several things that I would like to get done if I am lucky enough to be elected. And one of my top priorities is going to be getting funding passed for transportation and infrastructure. Unfortunately, that fell through last time, and moving forward, that needs to be the highest priority to get done right away at the beginning of this next session. I would also like to increase transparency in the same regard. One of the reasons the transportation bill did not pass was because we did not have enough time to look through it. So I would like to institute a minimum 24 hours after a bill has been introduced for legislators to read it, as well as limiting bills to only one topic. This way, our legislators can be informed voters, just like we ask all of you to be.
Mr. Torkelson.
Thank you. Well, the first and most critical issue right now is the tremendous increase in health care premiums for some of the residents of Minnesota. I've heard of increases of over 60% on a monthly bill, and these are on already high health care premiums, coupled with policies that have extremely high deductibles. So in some cases, people are going to be spending out of pocket $20, $30, $40, even $50,000 before they get their first dollar of health care. This is such a critical issue that we've been urging the governor to actually call a special session to begin to address this. We can't fix it instantly, and we can't fix everything, but there are some things we could do to address that issue, and I hope we do soon. Beyond that, the tax bill, of course, was passed both houses of the legislature with over nearly 90% of the votes of both the House and Senate, and was pocket vetoed by the governor over some wording that was needed to be fixed and that we agreed to fix, but he still vetoed the bill and refused to bring us back to special session. Of course, that included property tax relief for our farmers, which is an issue that's very important. Beyond that, bonding, pensions, buffer clarification, and better compensation for group home workers are issues that I think are very important.
Mr. Grossenberger, if you'd like, 1 minute to respond.
Okay. A moment ago, Paul said that one of his top priorities would be to help our nursing homes and group homes. And it is true. That has been a very common response that I've heard at the door when talking with my constituents, that healthcare costs are a huge issue with our group homes and our nursing homes. They have seen huge increases. So I am wondering why Paul voted against the increase in funding for those same group homes and nursing homes.
Mr. Torkelson, 1 minute.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure which vote you're talking about. We strongly supported legislation a year ago that increased funding for the workers in nursing homes, a substantial increase, and I have been a champion of increases for the workers in group homes. I'm not sure exactly what vote you're talking about, but it's an issue that I do support.
Mr. Torkelson, you'll respond first to this question. Do you support universal pre-K? Why or why not?
I do not support universal pre-K, mostly for a number of reasons. Number one being the cost. We have struggles as it is finding adequate funding for health care. I do support targeted government help for those that most need pre-K education. We have some programs in existence already that are working quite well. I think we should build on those programs. In some of our rural districts, we don't even have adequate physical space to set up these programs if they would be mandated, and the extremely high cost, not only the upfront cost but ongoing cost to supply these services would be very challenging for our budget. We've just heard the last couple of days that our budget is not doing as well as forecast, so funding is going to be at a premium.
Mr. Grossenberg, do you support universal pre-K, and why or why not?
I absolutely support universal pre-K. I want to get this done for our families with young children. Single parents or families with two working parents need daycare. Right now, daycare is too expensive or too full. It is just not available in many places in our area. We need to take this burden off of our families with young children. We can solve this problem and give kids the head start they need to succeed in school by providing access to universal preschool. That is why I would like to get this done for our families by supporting universal pre-K.
Do you have any response, Mr. Torkelson?
No, I think I covered the issue pretty well.
Okay. Then we will move on to the next question. What are your concerns about the MNsure program, and what can the legislature do to address them? And Mr. Grossenberg, you would be first in responding to this question.
Okay. A common thing that has been heard from MNsure is that it does not do enough to support our families, and I would like to see an increase in the minimum salary to provide access to MNsure to help close the gap between who does and does not qualify for that. Healthcare should be a right, and we need to make sure that we are taking care of our families by providing a higher quality healthcare. Healthcare costs in this country have gotten much too high, and we need to do something about that.
Mr. Torkelson?
Thank you, Linda. This is too short a time to cover all the problems with MNsure. I'll try to hit some highlights. First, the software involved with signing up for people trying to sign up through MNsure has never worked well. It continues to have problems, and people can't get through, can't get signed up. There's lots of problems with the administration of MNsure. When it was set up, they refused to put healthcare experts on the board, so it's been poorly run. I referred earlier to the high costs of healthcare, not directly related to MNsure, but indirectly. This is really tied in closely with the Affordable Care Act, which is really not working very well. It's neither affordable, it's not affordable. Finally, we had a pool in Minnesota, the Minnesota pool, for people who needed insurance but were at high risk. We had to give up that pool when we signed up for MNsure, or for when MNsure was created and the Affordable Care Act went into effect. I would request that our federal legislators give us work towards getting a waiver so we could put that pool back in place so that people at high risk could get coverage, and those that aren't high risk could afford the coverage they need.
Do you have anything further, Mr. Grossenberg?
Yes. Issues with software and administration should not be counted against the bill itself, nor the spirit of the legislation, and should certainly be addressed. We need to make sure that our friends and families can access MNsure as easily as possible. And those things can be addressed without talking about the issues with the bill itself. And under the Affordable Care Act, we have seen huge increases in those covered by healthcare in this country.
Okay. Mr. Tulkeson, any further?
Well, yeah, those increases in Minnesota are not nearly so dramatic because we had a good program here in Minnesota. It needs to work. When the software doesn't work, people can't get their insurance. So we need to repair this. In fact, I would advocate for MNsure itself being dissolved and we go to the federal program.
All right, the next question is, how can legislators work to develop a comprehensive transportation program that meets the needs of the entire state over the next 10 years, and how can it be fully funded? Mr. Torkelson would be first.
Well, thank you. Transportation is a critical issue. We had many proposals that we worked through in the legislature, but none of them actually came to fruition. There was a major effort to address the short-term needs for transportation in the bonding bill. The bonding bill, of course, failed because of semantics in the Senate. There's a substantial amount of money in trunk highway bonds that's available today that only has to be authorized in order to be spent. That's the first step. There's a lot of talk about a gas tax, but if you look at the dynamics of a gas tax, it really is not a long-term solution. There's lots of cars that are using less and less gas. Some cars use no gas. As we see the move toward more technically advanced transportation, the gas tax, I don't think, is the best long-term solution. We had a proposal in our legislation that would have dedicated sales taxes on automotive parts and tires and rental cars to transportation. Would have been a big step in the right direction. If we had done that when we first proposed it, we would have a lot more money going to transportation today.
Mr. Grossenberg?
Thank you. Transportation has been a huge issue when talking with voters. We need to make sure that we are sustainably funding our transportation for the future. And I do support a gas tax. That is not the only solution, and it is not a long-term solution past 10, 15, 20 years. But before then, we definitely will still be using gasoline, and having a gas tax will serve to help incentivize people to use more gas-efficient vehicles as we transition to cleaner energy. But it is important to me that we work on getting it accomplished and getting it accomplished soon. So when I am elected, I would prefer to work across the aisles and compromise and use multiple sources of funding to make sure that this gets accomplished and we can sustain our transportation long term. As for the bill that was passed, some of those semantics were $100 million error that would have cost taxpayers a large amount of money, as well as the light rail that is crucial for transportation up in the metro area and would bring in federal money that otherwise would be left on the table. Thank you.
Did you have any response, Mr. Torkelson?
Thank you. Well, I would just add that funding transportation has been a very difficult issue to deal with over the years. Not this past but the biennium before, when the Democrats were in full charge of both the House and the Senate and the governor's office, they still couldn't pass a gas tax. It's hard, challenging work. I intend to work on it. I hope we can find a way to get more funding for transportation. As far as light rail goes, that issue has been solved after the session. The CTIB and the governor and others found the funding necessary to move that forward, so that should no longer be the holdup for what we need to do with transportation and bonding.
Did you have any further comment, Mr. Grossenberg?
No, thank you.
What steps would you like the state legislature to do to move Minnesota toward conversion to renewable energy sources and phasing out reliance on fossil fuels? And Mr. Torkelson will respond first.
Well, thank you. Certainly renewable energy is a hot topic, but at the same time, we have to remember that we need base power generation. The sun doesn't shine all day and night, and the wind doesn't blow all the time. And when we need power, we expect power to be at our outlets whenever we need it. And so that means we need base generation and we need affordable energy. So we have to look at the whole picture. We can't just focus only on renewables because they cannot fill the bill at this point in time. At the same time, one word that we don't hear enough of, I think, is conservation. The energy that we don't use is the best way to save energy by making our buildings and our homes and our businesses more energy efficient. We actually move a long ways toward in the right direction.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I have it here. It is very important to me to move towards renewable energy. As a science teacher, it's something that I talk about with my students regularly. And we need to make sure that we do not lose sight of the fact that while we may not have the infrastructure right now to be fully independent of fossil fuels, that will come in the future, and that's what we need to be working towards. And we also need to make sure that we are not ignoring the science behind other sources besides solar and wind, such as nuclear. If we can harness that with the proper shielding, it is safer and cleaner than most other forms of energy generation and can provide for all of our nation's electrical needs. And with the advances that have come since the 90s, we no longer have to worry about any meltdowns or anything like Fukushima happening ever again. We have fixed that particular issue. As for what Minnesota can do, having things like the gas tax to help incentivize moving towards more energy efficient vehicles, as well as possibly having tax incentives for moving to those vehicles, might be good ways to go. Thank you.
Mr. Torkelson, anything?
Yeah, just a
Further?
quick comment. Thank you, Linda. I think we found a point where Mr. Grossenberg and I agree, and that's on nuclear power. I believe it is a viable alternative. It emits virtually no greenhouse gases. If we would utilize the modern technology available, I think it's something we should use. We can't use that exclusively, but it's a step in the right direction.
Anything further?
Sounds like the first step towards bipartisan legislation. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Grossenberg, you would reply first to this question, which is, what is your position on the constitutional amendment that establishes a citizens' council to determine legislative salaries? Are legislators fairly compensated now?
Okay. There have been many sides to this issue whether or not a citizen council should be in charge of what legislators make. I definitely believe that citizens should be involved in the process. And it is hard to say that legislators are compensated fairly at the state level when we are or would be making about $30,000 a year, which is not enough to live on, but it also makes it hard to have another job. I definitely believe that there is too large of a gap between what state legislators make and what national legislators make, and there should definitely be a citizen council to govern that so that they are not constantly voting for increases for themselves. As for the citizen council idea, we saw that with California, where they had their city council or city citizen, there's the word I was looking for, council, actually reduce their legislators' wages. But it is important to get information, get feedback from the citizens in this process, and to make sure that everyone is making an informed decision.
Mr. Torkelson.
Thank you. Well, I would just note first that I have never voted to raise my own salary. It's never been an issue, and that the legislature is supposed to be a part-time job. It is, however, very demanding. We do not know what decisions the Citizens Council would make should this issue pass. They may raise or they may lower salaries. But I think citizens should be aware that it's most likely that if this passes, salaries would likely go up. We don't know that for sure. It is getting more and more difficult to recruit candidates to run for office. It's something I get involved with a little myself in other districts because of the low salary. If you're a younger person who has a family and expects to send your kids to college, etc., the compensation available for a legislator is quite low. On the other hand, as I said earlier, it's a part-time job, so it's a challenge to work that out. I don't think we want a legislature that is occupied only by independently wealthy or folks that just happen to be in a situation where they can serve and others can't. That's what we want to avoid, and so I encourage all citizens to think about this issue, work through it, and vote accordingly on the ballot on November 8th.
Any rebuttal or further comment?
I agree with Paul, and this may be considered to be a part-time position, and it is. The session meets half a year, and that allows you to have other part-time work outside of that, but it is extremely difficult to hold a job that you can only attend for half a year. As a teacher, I have the ability to become a sub for that half of the year, which makes it easier for me. I would imagine that as a farmer, Paul has that same luxury. But he is correct that we want to make sure that we have representation from all walks of life, not just the independently wealthy.
Any further comment?
The only other thing I'd say that we have seen some legislators leave the legislature because of the lack of compensation.
The next question is, with Governor Dayton sure to be the governor for the next 2 years, how would you work to get legislation passed, especially the budget bills, in a timely manner? Let me see here. It's Mr. Torkelson first this time.
Well, thank you. I've worked closely with the governor on a number of issues over these last 6 years. It hasn't always been easy. Sometimes the governor can be quite difficult to work with, frankly. But that doesn't mean I don't try. I have met with him on an individual basis on a number of occasions. Sometimes we come to agreement and sometimes we don't. I will not give up trying to find common ground and trying to keep legislation moving forward. And I would hope that the governor will respond in kind, that he will be willing to actually sit down and negotiate and willing to move issues forward. I mentioned earlier the pocket veto of the tax bill. That's just one example of a governor that seems to be unwilling to sign on to bipartisanly supported issues. So that's where I'm at. I will continue to do that work. I work closely with the governor's staff, both in the bonding committee and in the environment committee. I've worked very closely with the governor and his staff. I've put some of the governor's favorite issues into legislation. This last year, he spoke strongly about water and water quality, and especially about the need for infrastructure in our small towns, both wastewater and drinking water. We had a substantial amount of that in the bonding bill, but of course that did not happen, and that is very frustrating for me, and I would think it'd be frustrating for the governor too, because at one time anyway, during the session, it was his #1 priority.
Mr. Grossenberg.
Thank you. It has always been my belief that compromise is the way to get things done. We need to make sure that we have support from both sides and make sure that things are written in a fair manner and in a timely manner. We need to make sure that we have enough time to read the bills to make sure that errors don't find their way into the legislation that can cost our taxpayers money, so that the governor does not have to choose between passing a bill with an error in it or vetoing that. As a teacher, it has been ingrained into me how to work with people of all walks of life. Last year, I taught in a rural school out in Springfield, Minnesota, and many of my coworkers had different political views than I did, which I was lucky enough to get to discuss with them once they found out that I was running. And talking with them, I was able to find common ground, and I can use that skill to find common ground in St. Paul with Governor Dayton.
Anything further, Mr. Torkelson?
I would just add, when it comes to legislation, passing perfectly worded legislation is virtually impossible. Every year we have a bill called the Reviser's Bill. That bill makes corrections in language that occur during the session because it's hard, difficult work to get language in perfect shape. We agreed to fix those issues with the governor, and he, of course, didn't accept that invitation. I would also add that as I worked on the bonding bill this year, we passed a small bill in the first year of the biennium, and it had over 20 corrections in that bill resulting from the work from the year before. Errors in language are not uncommon.
Any further comment?
It is not surprising to me that errors in language such as legislation might be common, especially when we try to shove in far too many things into the same bill and do not give our legislators enough time to properly review it.
Okay, the next question will be answered first by Mr. Grossenberg. How can the legislature address the low pay of workers in nursing homes, group home, and other care facilities?
Thank you. It is very important to me that we provide funding for our seniors and for the families who support them, as well as for the disabled, with sensible increases in funding for nursing homes and for group homes. All across the state, our nursing homes are understaffed and underpaid. This leads to an unacceptably high turnover rate at all of our care facilities. On top of that, costs are spiraling out of control. At a recent meeting with my constituents, I heard a story of a man who had seen those increases that Paul mentioned earlier of 40, 50, 60% in the cost while he was taking care of his mother. And that is unacceptable. You cannot have costs for them increase that dramatically, that fast. You can't budget for that. So we need to do better and get things done for our families who support seniors and the disabled by doing our job and providing the financial support that our care staff need to do their jobs. So that is why I support increasing funding for nursing homes and group homes.
Mr. Torkelson.
Thank you. Nursing home funding was increased quite substantially last year. We didn't just add a percentage, though, to those payments. We also reformed the system so that those nursing homes that do a good job are rewarded for the good work they do, rather than just adding more and more dollars to the system. I think we should do a similar approach to our compensation for those that work in group homes. We need to take a look at the system and try and find efficiencies and reward those group homes that are doing a good job so that they can continue in business. There is a tremendous challenge filling those jobs. As I visit group homes especially, I find that workers are very dedicated to caring for those folks that need those services, but it's hard. I forget the exact percentage of jobs that go unfilled right now, but it's quite high. And so that means the folks that are dedicated to working at those group homes are putting in extra hours, lots of overtime, just to make sure that coverage is there. By obtaining better compensation for those workers, we could hopefully fill more of those jobs, relieve some of that pressure on the workers that are working extra hours now, and kind of get the ship back in balance.
Any rebuttal?
Thank you. He's absolutely correct that our nursing homes did receive a bonus. Our group homes sadly did not, and they are feeling the effects of that. I have worked in group homes in the past, and when I started, there were 2 of us to take care of the clients 24/7. I put in 80-hour weeks or more just to make sure that we had the coverage we needed there. We need to make sure that we increase that funding in this next session so that they can provide their employees a livable wage that will keep them in the career. And we need to make sure that they are receiving the training that they need to perform the job functions that they are asked to do every day.
Anything further on that question?
Well, the only other thing that I would add would be we've had systems in place in Minnesota where the residents of group homes have had the opportunity for employment. In some cases, those systems are being threatened by changes in the way they are administered by the state. I think that's a mistake. I think the dignity of work for folks that live in these group homes is something that's important, and they should have the opportunity to work, even if it's a job that is, it's not extremely well paid, but still it's certainly good for their spirit and good for the whole system if they do have the chance for employment.
Excuse me. The next question is, how do you see the future of agriculture in Minnesota? That would be to you first, Mr. Torkelson.
Well, thank you. As a farmer myself, and kind of nearing that point in my farming career where I'm thinking about phasing myself out of the operation, it's something I think about virtually every day. I think the long-term future for agriculture is still bright. As far as I know, people are still going to want to eat, and what we produce on the farm not only supplies food, but it also supplies energy and fiber, other products that are useful and important to our society. I'm proud to be a farmer. I'm proud of my other colleagues in farming. But if you look at the average age, it tends to continue to creep up. So I think it behooves all of us in agriculture to try and create opportunities for young people to get into farming. It's getting more and more challenging because of the extremely high costs involved, especially capital investment costs. But those of us that are still in the business, I think, can try to open doors for young people that want to work in farming. I've been really thrilled to see the upsurge in our ag programs in our high schools. We have a couple of award-winning programs here in Brown County. Kids care about agriculture. They're interested in getting involved, and there are lots of opportunities besides just being a farmer. I shouldn't say just being a farmer. Besides being a farmer, there are other opportunities in agriculture for those that are interested and would like to work in that area. And I hope that we can continue to educate our young people so that they can take advantage of these tremendous opportunities in today's modern agriculture.
Go ahead, Mr. Grossenberg.
Thank you. Paul mentioned an award-winning ag program in our district, and I was lucky enough to teach in one of those last year. Springfield had an amazing ag program, and I was lucky enough to work with some of those teachers, and they do an amazing job with our youth. Agriculture is very important to our economy. It's not something that will ever go away, and we need to make sure that we are building for the future and making sure that the youth in our district know that this is a place where they can stay after they graduate. And one of the ways that we can do that is by making sure that we have adequate broadband coverage in our rural areas. Staying connected is very important to this generation, and we need to make sure that they don't feel that they are shut out from the world by remaining in the rural area. Thank you.
Any rebuttal?
Well, thank you. I would just add that the short-term perspectives for agriculture are not nearly so bright. We currently have very low commodity prices, especially compared to the cost of our inputs. We have a challenging harvest here in this part of Minnesota. It's going to be, I think we're in one of the down cycles of agriculture. Many farmers are prepared for this, but not all. And as we go into next year and the need for borrowing the money it takes to put in a crop, it could be very challenging for some people, especially young farmers just starting out. And that's why I would continue to support the property tax relief that's in the tax bill for ag land.
Mr. Grossenberg?
Thank you. Moving forward short term with our agriculture, we need to make sure that we are supporting our small family farms, as they are the least equipped to be able to handle issues like we've seen this year with the large amounts of rain, preventing them from getting to their fields and harvesting their crops. So we need to make sure that we are supporting them and keeping them afloat. Thank you.
What can the state do to improve public health and safety? Mr. Grossenberg first.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
What can the state do to improve public health and safety?
Okay. There are many ways that we can improve public health and safety. And one of those ways is to make sure that all of our government employees, specifically law enforcement agencies at this point, have the training that they need to be able to deal with anyone that they might come across, whether that be a minority or someone with a disability. It has been an issue in many parts of the state that law enforcement officers have not adequately dealt with someone who has a disability, and luckily, most of the time that ends fine. Occasionally that ends with a loss of life, and that is very tragic. I do not want to sound like I do not support our police officers. They do an amazing job, and I am friends with several police officers, and they are very close, and I support what they do, and most of them are incredibly good at their job, but we need to make sure that we are providing the training for any that might not understand exactly how to deal with anyone who has a disability.
Mr. Torkelson.
Well, thank you. We have a great system of public health services in every county in Minnesota. I support the work they do. They have tremendous challenges working, as Mr. Grossenberg said, with the issues around mental health. But there's also a variety of public health issues, whether it's food safety or vaccinations. or safety of our kids as they make their way to and from school. These are all important public health issues. There's a great program here in New Ulm. The Heart of New Ulm program has really demonstrated that we can make significant improvements in public health with the right kinds of programs that encourage people to take care of themselves. This also part of that program involves getting social workers into our ER as we look at the costs of health care, especially public health care, making sure that people are going to the appropriate place to get the care they need is very important. We've had some issues with people chronically using the emergency room rather than going to the clinic. That's very expensive for the system. And by having a social worker in the emergency room and identifying those people that need services but really don't need to be in the ER, instead getting them an appointment at the clinic and during clinic hours has proved to save a significant amount of money. The downside, of course, is that's less income for the hospital. So they have a challenge filling that gap in their funding, but it's the right thing to do, and I would hope that we would continue to support those programs. And along with the mental health issues that Mr. Grossenberg mentioned.
Any rebuttal or further comment?
I would just add that it is important to also think of our schools when we think about public health and safety. We need to make sure that our youth are being educated properly and being informed citizens when they graduate, so that they are not part of the problem. Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Torkelson?
The only other thing I would add is the continued awareness, that we need to have continued awareness of the potential for diseases that come from foreign countries and are spread through our population. We need to educate our population on how to stay safe and prevent those transmission of those diseases. The world is getting to be a smaller place all the time. It's easier for things to get across the ocean and from country to country than it's ever been before. And we've seen potentially very serious outbreaks like Ebola and the potential for a flu pandemic. So we need to be prepared, and we need to educate our population so they are prepared to react properly.
Okay. We have time for one more question. And this one is actually directed specifically to Mr. Torkelson, but both of you will have the opportunity to respond. And it was Mr. Torkelson's turn to go first anyway. What is the purpose of the American Legislative Exchange Council? What, if any, is your association with it, and are you a member?
Well, thank you. The American Legislative Exchange Council is one of many groups of legislators that are formed in various ways. It's a national level group. I am a member of the American Legislative Exchange Council, although I haven't attended any of their meetings recently. They do have conservative leanings. I'm also very active in the Council of State Governments and the National Association of State Legislators. Those meetings I have attended recently. I'm also very active in currently a commissioner on the Great Lakes Commission. I just got back from Toronto, where I met with the commission. The commission is made up of members from 8 states and 2 Canadian provinces. The American Legislative Exchange Council has received a lot of criticism from liberals because they think it's too conservative. I try to keep an open mind and listen to a variety of perspectives. I'm a joiner. I'm a member. I happen to be a member of 2 county farm bureaus, the Farmers Union, and a whole bunch of other ag groups, including soybean growers and corn growers. All these groups have a perspective, and I like getting their information and opportunities to meet with members of these groups when those opportunities present themselves. I'm not ashamed to be a member of the American Legislative Exchange Council, but it's not something that it's not like they lead me around by the nose, certainly, and that's the impression some people try to give.
Mr. Grossenberg, any comment regarding that issue?
Thank you. I feel as an educator, responding to such a question that the constituents may not have heard of ALEC. So I feel that I need to explain what that is. ALEC, or ALEC, is a lobbying firm specifically for corporate interests. And what they do is they provide legislators with bills that are made in their favor for them to either accept or deny. And one of the biggest critiques of such an industry is that they are not, let's say, impartial to the legislative process. And as to answering this specific question, I obviously have no ties with them, as I have not currently a legislator, nor have I ever been.
Mr. Tolkison, any rebuttal?
Well, I'm going to venture onto some very thin ice at this point. I mentioned earlier that my wife is a retired teacher. I was a teacher at one time. The teachers union in Minnesota is extremely active. They spend millions of dollars trying to not only affect legislation, but to affect races across the state of Minnesota. Their impact on Minnesota government is many times stronger than the impact of ALEC ever would be. And I'd point that out because it's just one of many. ALEC is one of many. The TRA is one of many, or Teachers Union is one of many. It's a process where all these organizations get involved, have their way of doing it, and have their perspective, which some agree with and some disagree with.
Mr. Grossenberg, anything further on that issue?
Yes. Education Minnesota is involved in the legislative process. There is quite a bit of difference between the two organizations. For one, Education Minnesota is made up of teachers, and they do not spend their time creating bills for legislators to pass, but instead attempt to educate, as that's what they were trained to do, to make sure that legislators make informed decisions that are beneficial to our children.
All right, we will now move to our closing remarks, and the candidates each have, I believe, 1 minute, and we will start with Mr. Grossenberg.
Thank you. In closing, I just want to thank you all for coming out and being involved and for those amazing questions. I hope I have answered adequately. If not, feel free to contact me. I have a Facebook, I have a website. You can easily Google that. And I hope that I have shown that my goal is to get things done for our friends, for our families, and for the constituents in the district. Thank you.
Mr. Torkelson.
Well, I'd first like to thank you, Linda, and thank the League of Women Voters for organizing this debate or presentation. It's been a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank Mr. Grossenberg for taking part. It's our first chance to really exchange views in a public forum, and I appreciate that. I would like to remind everyone that I have a good, solid record in the legislature. I have a record of leadership. I have a record of standing up for Greater Minnesota. I have a record of standing up for agriculture. And I would very much like to continue my work at the legislature. I work hard. I serve on 6 committees in the legislature. That's more than any other legislator in the whole place. And so I work hard, and I intend to continue to work hard, and I ask for your support in November. On November 8th, I ask you to vote for Paul Torkelson.
Thank you to both of you for coming tonight and participating. We appreciate your willingness to serve as an elected official. And thank you for helping us inform the voters. Thank you again to KNUJ, NewCat, and of course the Journal for partnering with us this year. Thank you to all who are here tonight listening, or who are here tonight present and who are listening at home. If you appreciate the work that the league is doing here, please contact us and join us. We have several league members helping us. We have timekeepers Annie Wilczek, Harriet Erberg. I said Torgelson so many times tonight. Teresa Keaveney is screening questions. We have Jeannie Hinsman, Voter Service Chair, and our hostess is Manon Frazier. We have another candidate forum coming up at 8 o'clock tonight. We will have the candidates for Senate District 16. We also have another forum next Monday, the 17th, for the City Council. It'll be also held here in the New Ulm City Council chambers at 7 p.m. Thursday, October 27th, we will have the county commissioners again here at City Council chambers in New Ulm at 7 o'clock p.m. So thank you again, everyone, and please remember to vote. Welcome to this evening's candidate forum sponsored by the Journal and the League of Women Voters New Ulm. My name is Linda Heine. I will serve as moderator tonight for the candidate forum for our candidates for State Senate District 16. These candidates are standing for election in the general election on November 8th. The League has been a presence in New Ulm for 80 years. We are an active group of women and men who believe that democracy is strengthened when citizens become informed voters. We are a nonpartisan political group encouraging informed and active participation in government. We do not support political parties or endorse candidates. We strive to influence public policy through education and advocacy. If this work is important to you, I invite you to pick up membership information on the back table or speak to any of the members present here tonight helping with the forum. Members can be identified by their League of Women Voters buttons. Tonight's forum is being aired live on New Ulm Community Access Television and KNUJ AM. We request that audience members do not tape or record the event other than those who are members of the invited media. Please also turn off your cell phones. We will begin tonight with the candidates each giving introductory remarks. They will have up to 1.5 minutes for their introductions. Following their introductions, each candidate will be offered a 2-minute opportunity to respond to a question which we have submitted to them before tonight's meeting. The forum will then be open to questions from the listening audience, including those here tonight and those watching or listening from home. The questions for those present can be will be written on note cards and given to our ushers. If you are not here tonight and wish to call in with a question, the phone number is 276-8591. For each of the questions, the candidates will be given 2 minutes for a response, and each one will also be given a 1-minute rebuttal or opportunity to comment on the other's answer. We have timekeeper in the front row here who will indicate for the candidates how they're doing on time and let them know when their time is up. The League does screen the questions for the candidates. Our policy includes that questions on similar issues may be consolidated or rephrased. Questions that are deemed hostile, antagonistic, friendly, supportive, or of gratuitous content will not be accepted. The questions must be directed to pertinent issues of this elective office and not be related to personal matters. The questions become the property of the League of Women Voters if listeners feel a question has not been adequately addressed, or if they offered a question that we did not have time for. We invite all individuals to contact their candidates directly. Again, the phone number to call in questions is 276-8591. Following the questioning period, each candidate will be allowed a 1-minute closing statement. And we will begin now with candidates for Senate District 16 with opening statements. And we will begin with Mr. Connie.
Good evening, and thank you, Linda, for moderating, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for being such a gracious host of us this evening. I really appreciate and look forward to the questions that we will have this evening. It gives us a chance to really answer the voters directly. I'm a 6th-generation Minnesota dairy farmer. My family has been here since 1854 and been continuously farming in one part of the state or another since then. What I'm really happy, though, for is that I'm not a last-generation farmer. Right now, my daughter Linda and her husband Andy are taking over the family farm, and very happy to be seeing my grandchildren grow up on the farm as I did, because as a multi-generation family farm, it is really wonderful to have that in our communities. I grew up near Ortonville, graduated from high school there, and went on to Moorhead State, where I spent 4 years and then came back and started farming, and have been farming ever since. I'm active in my church in a group called Land Stewardship Project, and also a member of Farmers Union. We have many things that we can talk to this evening about, and I look forward to that. Transportation, health care, issues that will be on the table.
Thank you. Mr. Dames.
Well, thank you, Linda. I appreciate your moderating the event tonight, and I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters, New Ulm Cable Access, and KNUJ for broadcasting this. I am Gary Dames, currently serving my second term in the Minnesota Senate, which would be my 6th year. Born and raised in the Redwood Falls area, I graduated from the University of Minnesota with a degree in Ag Business and Economics. I'm married to my wife, Barb, for 40 years. I'm fortunate to have 2 children, Michael and Michelle, and I have 2 grandchildren. I owned and operated the Dames Insurance Agency for 26 years and was very active in my community with involvement in various organizations, served on several boards and commissions. In 2008, I was fortunate enough to be elected as a Redwood County Commissioner and served in that capacity, served on several boards, including Health and Human Services, Soil and Water, Economic Development, Transportation and Rail, and the County Extension Committee. In 2010, I was elected into the Minnesota Senate, and my current district is Current District Senate 16, which includes all or part of Brown County, Redwood County, Lyon County, Yellow Medicine, Lacaparo, and I think that was all of them.
A little bit of Renville.
I'm just
lived there.
2 townships and 2 communities in Renville. Currently, I serve on the Commerce Committee, the E12 Education Policy Committee, and the E12 Finance Committee, State Departments and Vets, and I'm the ranking member on the Jobs, Agriculture, and Rural Development Committee. I also serve as Assistant Minority Leader, and I see I'm stopped.
If elected to this office, what would you most like to accomplish in your term as representative or senator, if it as it were? And Mr. Dames, I'd ask you first to address the question.
Well, thank you for the question. If elected, my primary focus as your state senator is to find practical solutions to problems facing Minnesota families, businesses, and our local government and our local communities. In 2016, the House and Senate passed a tax bill with nearly 90% positive vote. We need to get that tax bill back, or one similar to it. That tax bill included working family tax credits. It excluded student loan credits, child care tax credits, reduction of statewide business property tax. It had an agricultural property tax credit, and also expanded the past military service tax credit. So that was a very important bill that Governor Dayton vetoed. We also need to pass the bonding bill, which had $702 million in it for transportation spending, and some of that money was for the Highway 14 project. And we need to fix MNsure by enacting some common sense reform that lowers the insurance premiums, especially in our individual market. That's just a real calamity there. Transportation, we have to find a long-term funding solution for roads and bridges, but it has to be long-term. It can't be just kicking the can down the road as we've done in the past. In education, we have to address the growing achievement gap. Minnesota has one of the gaps larger than a lot of the other states. That has to be looked at. We have to also provide adequate funding for our seniors and for our disabled residents. This is a budget year, so we need to make sure that we pass a budget bill that lives within our means and bases funding on the program's effectiveness and not just automatic increases.
Mr. Connie.
I want to bring leadership, not excuses, to the Senate. Effective leadership is kind of like good coaching. It brings out the best in people and challenges everyone on the team to work for a goal. Now, I don't see myself as one of the, star players on the team. I see myself as a team player. I see many team players that we have in our community, our city administrators, our township officers, our business people, our farmers, who I think as a part of the team as a state legislator would be, we could work together to achieve the goals that we need. We need to build consensus that will provide a comprehensive transportation bill. This is something that has been evading us for years, and I think that going forward, this time we should look at probably a 10-year solution, because it doesn't seem like they can get it done any more often than once every 10 years. We have seen many things come and go in the legislation, last legislative session, that didn't get done. We didn't see a bonding bill get done. We didn't see a tax bill that got through the process completely. Now, we have comparisons we can go back and look at over the last term that my opponent has been in. And we've had a time when the Republicans were in control. We've had a time when the Democrats were in control, and we have a split. When we had Democrats in control, we got a lot done. It was one of the most productive legislative sessions in the last 30 to 40 years. When we had the Republicans in control, we ended up going to a special session just to get the state back working again, and we put it on the backs of the schools to balance the budget.
Mr. Dames, do you have any rebuttal?
No, that's fine.
Okay. The next question would be addressed first to Mr. Connie. What is your position on restoring voting rights to felons living in the community?
When people have done their time and paid the price for what they've done wrong, and they come back to the community and they are citizens again, just like you and I, they should be given their voting rights back at that point. Obviously, they don't get voting rights when they're in jail. But one of the problems we have right now is that with extended probation times, the point at which they get their voting rights back is been pushed out further and further. There should be a limited point after which they've done their time where they would be able to get their voting rights back.
Mr. Dames?
Well, I feel that when they get back into the community, they need to complete their probationary time. Once they've completed their probationary time, I feel that they should have the rights restored for them to vote. But I feel they need to complete the total sentence, and that sentence includes their jail time, plus it includes their probationary time.
Any rebuttal, Mr. Connie?
Well, if that probationary time was not excessive, that would be fine. But if it were, say, over 5 years, I think that's way too much time to wait until they would start to vote.
Mr. Dames, anything further?
I made my comments. I mean, I still feel the same way. I think that if somebody, typically when you have a long probation period, it shortens up the jail period. So I think there's offsets there.
How can the state address funding needs for Minnesota's higher education system? Mr. Dames.
Well, I think that one of the things we have to take a look at is, when we start looking at funding higher education, we take a look at the amount of money that we give to the University of Minnesota and the amount of money that we give to MnSCU. We also have to look at, under the HEAPR portion of it, the number of dollars that we could increase there through bonding so that we would have them putting less of their tuition money into running the campuses and more of it in for teaching and instruction and things like that. I think also we have to look at the colleges maybe having more programs to where they have like a flagship type program that they build around that. I think that's being done. At the Southwest State, I've been instrumental in getting the agricultural educators program in full force over there. That seems to be working really well. That's drawing more students, giving more options. So I think there's things we can do like that.
Mr. Connie?
We have seen in the last 15 years the funding for higher education in the state go from a 2/3 amount being taken on by the state to down to about 1/3. This has meant that our students' burden has gone up by that 1/3. They've had to make up the difference by taking out loans, many times in the tens, maybe in up to over $100,000 in loans by the time they get through graduate school. This has meant that these young people, when they graduate, cannot go out and buy a house. They cannot really, many of them don't even start a family very quickly because of that huge burden. We need to lower that. One of the things we can do immediately would be to allow for the refinancing of those student loans. This would help those who have already graduated, and we would be able to help people going forward in that way. But we also need to find ways to reduce the cost of tuition and at the very least freeze it. Over the course of the last 15 years, we've seen tuition costs just climb and climb, pushing college out of reach for many people. Unfortunately, though, most of the jobs by 2020, 70% of the jobs that are new jobs at that point will require at least 2 years of post-secondary education. And at this time, only 50% of our workforce has that amount of education. We are expecting people to fill the jobs without giving them the opportunity to do so.
Mr. James, any rebuttal?
Yeah, I would just like to comment on, that's one of the things that we had in the tax bill was a tax credit for student loans, and that could have made a major difference. Another thing that we're also seeing is we're seeing a lot of cooperation between business and the schools, in where the business helps foot some of the tuition costs and stuff for people to come back. I think we also have to look at the type of training we're doing and making sure that our education system is giving the education that the industry needs. And so we have to match those up, and I think we're doing a better job at that, but we got a long ways to go yet.
Mr. Connie, any rebuttal?
Yes. My opponent keeps bringing up that tax bill, and I would like to make a point at this time that that tax bill had a lot of errors in it, other than just the fact that it had a couple of wording errors. The main one being that I would call it an incumbent reelection bill. And it gave a lot of money away to a lot of special interests and did so on the backs of Minnesotans. In fact, over 2/3 of the money that would have been given out during that tax bill would have left the state. We can do better.
We all know that the state needs money. How do you prioritize the sources of revenue? The question is not focused on how you prioritize where revenue is spent, but where it has come from. And Mr. Connie would respond first.
Sources of revenue for the state is a very important question, in that we need to look at whether or not the source is progressive or regressive in its source. A progressive source is one where it is based on the ability of the person to pay, and a regressive one is a flat fee for everybody that pays, no matter what their income is. Examples of regressive taxes are like your license tabs, when you go down to get your hunting licenses, or when you go to pay your property taxes. These are all regressive taxes. Progressive taxes, the income tax is the most progressive tax, and then under that, the sales tax is kind of a hybrid in between, in that, yes, everybody pays it, but the people who have the most purchases obviously pay the most. Prioritizing going forward, we need to make sure that we put the most burden where the most pay could be made. And that is what the legislature did 4 years ago when they balanced the budget. They ended up taking out loopholes of $600 million out of corporate tax loopholes, and they also increased the tax on the top 5%. At that time, it was stated that, hey, these people will leave the state. They did not. And why did they not leave the state? Even though their tax rate went up by 5%, their actual tax bill only went up by 0.1%, because actually, when you get to that bracket, you have the most possible ways of getting your taxes back.
Mr. James.
Well, when we look at taxes and where the money's going to come from, when we start talking about regressive and progressive, we get to a certain point to where we get to the curve and we start bending that curve down. And when the raised taxes were raised by little over $2 billion and fees by over $600 million, so about a $2.7 billion tax increase in 2013, we're now starting to see the impacts of that. We're now starting to see that our taxes coming in from higher earning people are starting to regress, because a lot of those people have left the state, and that's fact. And so what is happening is we're starting to see that. We are down now about $30 million per month for the first 3 months of this current biennium, and we're also seeing that our income taxes are going down. And so what has happened is when minimum wages and things like that were raised, we increased a lot of tax dollars coming into the state of Minnesota. But what's happening is now as we got the higher wage earners leaving the state of Minnesota, and we're not, and the increase that was plugged in there isn't keeping up. So we're actually in a position where we're starting to lose taxable income and income tax dollars because of people leaving the state.
Rebuttal.
He mentioned raising the minimum wage is a problem. I do not think that raising the minimum wage is a problem in the least. It has been shown that you put money into the hands of the people who can most likely to spend it, is most likely that that money will circulate in your community and that it helps the economy in general. Our state is in better shape now than it was before those taxes were raised. In fact, we balanced the budget because of those tax raises. If we hadn't done that, we would still owe the schools for the money that was borrowed in order to make the balanced budget when the Republicans controlled the legislature.
Mr. Dames.
Yes, when the Republicans controlled the legislature, we come into the $5.5 billion deficit, and we did control that deficit. We put some spending caps in place. We've done some other things, and just for the record, the majority of the school shift from the previous DFL regime was paid for in that 2011-2012 period, and besides that, the shift that we took, the majority of that was paid, and by the time we shifted from the majority to the minority, that school shift was already paid, and that was paid because of the decisions that we made, and that's part of the reason the economy started to turn around quicker in Minnesota than other places. It wasn't because of a $2.5 billion tax increase. It was because of some controlled and limited spending.
Can I rebut that, please?
No, we've already given you each
Okay.
2 tranches. The next question is that nitrate contamination of our lakes and streams has become a recognized problem. What steps should the legislature take to address this issue? Mr. Dames.
Well, currently, there's a lot of dollars that come through the Outdoor Heritage Fund and the Clean Water Council that go in for cleaning up our waters and our streams and things like that. And nitrates is a part of that process, and we are spending dollars to do that. And we need to make sure that we keep working on that in order to keep that in balance and in check. But on the other hand, we have to be realistic about what those numbers should be and how they're going to affect things. And we have to make sure that as we do this, that we do it on a cost basis situation to where we need to make sure that the results are cost efficient and that we're using modern science and modern technology in order to do that.
Mr.
Nitrate pollution is a very serious problem for some of the cities, especially, I can name one, Des Moines, that has to pay millions of dollars to get the nitrate out of their water in order to be able to use it. Now, that's in Iowa, not Minnesota, and we don't want to get there. What we have as controls on nitrate pollution, though, is basically voluntary. And what we need to have, if we're only going to have voluntary controls, is a lot more education in that area. And as a farmer, nitrates is something I use to make sure I get a good crop. And I put it onto the ground, and it costs me money to put it on. And we have to make sure that people are informed as to what is the proper rate and what is when you can do it. Now, going forward, I'm not sure that, voluntary controls is going to work completely. And what we have in the state right now, we can recognize that there are some soils, say in the southeastern part of the state, where they have a karst topography, where if you were to apply a lot of nitrogen in the fall, it would end up leaching away quite a bit of that. And in an area such as that, it should just plain be given that you don't put down nitrogen in the fall and you only put it down in the spring. In fact, it has been shown that side dressing of nitrogen is probably the most cost effective and the most effective and the least damaging way to use nitrogen as a farmer.
Mr. Dames, any rebuttal?
Nope, that's fine.
How should the legislature change its rules to make sure it gets its work done in a timely manner? Mr. Connie.
The legislature did not get done on time last time, and it has not gotten done on time quite a few times in the past. And the reason for this is that the rules are set at the beginning of the legislative session on how they will have the process for that session. And I've seen some rule changes that were proposed, and were proposed for this last legislative session, that were not passed. And they were not passed because there was an agenda to be forwarded where they deliberately delayed until the last minute to try to leverage for that reason to do it at the last minute. They thought they could get the best deal by doing it within the last couple of days. But if you plan for success, if you plan to get things done on time, they will get done on time. I've talked to people on the street. I talked to a high school superintendent who said, if I ran my school the way the legislature runs their business, I would be fired. It is impossible to do the job well and do it accurately and do it with just minutes or hours to spare. We need to have a process and set it at the beginning of the session that plans for success. And to do so, we get our committees lined up so that they have to go at a certain time, bills have to be published at a certain time, and votes have to be taken at a certain time, and we will get it done.
Mr. Dames.
Well, I think that the first thing we have to do is we have to try to make sure that we get cooperation from the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. In the last 6 years, that hasn't always been the case. In 2011 and 2012, we had the work done approximately 6 weeks before the end of session, and we presented our first bill, which was the agriculture bill, presented that to Governor Dayton, and Governor Dayton signed the bill. The bill was passed. The second bill we signed, he wanted to negotiate, and we negotiated, and we negotiated, and pretty soon we're to the end of the session, and the bills didn't get done. I'm not blaming it on Governor Dayton. I am saying when you have three functions of government that you have to work with, the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, you have to work, cooperate, you have to try to compromise. But you also, there's a certain point to where you're probably going to have given as much as you're going to give, and you have to defend some of the things that you believe in. So we have to try to work together. We have to try to put together these bills. The last session was kind of a real different issue. The thing kind of came in under the radar. This bonding bill, we had presented about, the Senate DFL presented a bonding bill in which they included no light rail because they had no intentions of doing anything with light rail. The Republican minority, we put forward a bonding bill. We couldn't get a hearing. We couldn't get that on the floor. The bill that came to the floor was a compromise bill between the House and the Senate. The bill was agreed to. There was an agreement, and at the last minute, the light rail was thrown on it, and the thing went south. Those things do happen. Do I like it? Absolutely not. But that is what happened, and we just have to work to try to move those things through. We hear about time frames and stuff like that. Those are good. I would like to see some of these time frames. I would like to see some of this stuff put into effect. I sit in the minority, and I have to get the majority pretty much to vote with that, so that don't always happen. But we'll continue to work on that as we have in the past.
Mr. Connie, any rebuttal?
As it's been pointed out, if you have a split legislature with the or a split between the legislature and the governors, it's really difficult to pass things and get them done sometimes. What we saw in 13 and 14, we had a unified government. The easy solution here, have a unified government again. I would also point out that looking back, that you talked about the carry forward of the deficit, and part of that carry forward of the deficit had to do with the fact that we also had a difference between a governor who said no new taxes all the time and a legislature who tried to work with him.
And Mr. Dames, any further?
Well, you know, we do have we do have the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, and that's a good way to do it. It's a good process. We have to keep working on that process. As far as getting back to one size of government, all being, as Jim is referring to, all being in the DFL, how did that really work for us? If we take a look at, we had a transportation bill, And the DFL, when they had the governor's office, the House, and the Senate, absolutely could not get a transportation bill passed. We keep talking about transportation and talk about why we can't get it done. When you have one body or one party that has the full control and they can't do it, that says that there's a lot of hard work to be done and we need to work to do it.
What should the state of Minnesota do to support the increasing needs for health care for our aging population, especially in rural areas? Mr. Daines will address that question to you first.
And I just have the little clarification
Sure.
there. When you're talking about health care, are you talking about providers to provide the health care? Are you talking about Medicaid? What is that question driving to?
I would interpret it to include all levels of health care for our aging population.
Okay, and that's fine. Okay, to start with, in 2015, we passed a bill that put $138 million into nursing homes. The majority of that money went into rural nursing homes in order to make the Medicaid payments closer to the payments that they were getting in the rural area. And in so doing that, we did help relieve a lot of access to people getting into the nursing homes and also providing the people working at the nursing homes with some better salaries. As far as the health insurance itself, most elderly people are either on Medicare or if they don't have the means, they're on Medicaid, and part of that is paid by the federal government. As far as access to health care, that's something that in rural Minnesota we have to make sure that we have access to health care for our seniors, and it has to be access in pretty much all of our communities or have relatively close access. I think we're really fortunate in Senate District 16. When I take a look around, we have a very strong hospital situation here in New Ulm. We have a strong one in Redwood. We have a strong one in Marshall. Many of our small communities over on the western side have very strong hospitals. They're working very well with their clients, with their customers, and with the providers to make sure that we do give a good hospital and we have clinics, and we do give good services to our seniors in the healthcare arena.
Mr. Connie?
Healthcare for our aging population, as my opponent has said, is provided by Medicare and Medicaid for the most part. But that is just the structure for the payment. As far as making sure that we have providers there, now that's a whole nother story. Now I'm a very proud father-in-law of a newly minted MD. He is now serving his internship in the Army because that paid for his training to be a medical doctor. And he went that path because he wanted to be able to come back to a small rural community and serve as a doctor and not have $200,000 in education bills to pay back when he started being a doctor. We need to have more people like that looking at coming back to our communities to serve as our local doctors and health caregivers to provide the care that we will need as we age and go forward.
Any response? Mr.
Yes, and congratulations to your son-in-law. I think that's great, and I hope he comes back to rural Minnesota. That would be fantastic. We do have a loan forgiveness program. If we can bring doctors and nurses into our small communities, our rural communities, I should say, we do have a loan forgiveness program. That program works fairly well, but we still need to get more medical folks, nurses, and doctors into our rural areas. But that is one piece of the puzzle that's worked very well.
Anything further, Mr. Connie?
Yes, my son-in-law chose not to go that route because it ties them down to a particular location for a period of time, and he felt that by having the option to go to the community he wanted to go to, it was better for him.
In the last legislative session, there was some very moving testimony in hearings regarding the Compassionate Care Act. What is your opinion on allowing terminally ill patients who are experiencing intense pain to have access to medically supported assistance to self-administer end-of-life treatment? Mr. Connie would answer that one first.
The Compassionate Care Act, it has been passed in, I believe, Oregon. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's the only place that it is actually been passed at this time. Basically, another term for that is assisted suicide. We have not gone there and not done so because we feel that at this time it is really difficult to know at what point the patient is making a rational and an informed decision about terminating their life. And the point being that if you're at a point where you're under a lot of pain and you're suffering from that pain, are you thinking rationally about that, or are you saying just do anything to end it? And there might be other ways of relieving the pain which would get them back to the state where they can make a rational decision, but I would hate to see a person make a decision in basically under duress that would terminate their life.
Mr. Dames?
Well, thank you. There seems to be a movement throughout the country to try to get that bill passed in a lot of the different states. That bill was introduced into the Health and Human Services Committee in the Senate last year. It did have quite a hearing. It was quite a long hearing. It was quite a contentious hearing. I do not support that process. I think that it's. I think there's too many unknowns. There's too much room for error. And I think there's too many times to where somebody, a relative or somebody, may be second guessing what that person may want. And as Jim referred to, they may not be cognizant because of some medical procedures or something they've had, or some of the drugs they may be taking. And I don't believe in assisted suicide. I don't support it. And I don't plan on supporting it if it comes up again this session.
Any further?
No,
comment?
no further.
Another healthcare question. Can the legislature play any role in the Alina nurses strike? And what is your position regarding the strengths and weaknesses of unions? And I know that there was some news on the Alina strike today. I don't know where it exactly stands. It seemed like it was pretty close to an end, perhaps. Go ahead, Mr. Dames.
I don't believe the legislative process should get involved in the Alina strike. However, that's not going to happen because, as I heard today in the news, they feel that they have a settlement, and they feel that that settlement would be passed. And Governor Dayton did announce that today, so I think that is settled. And what was the second half of your question?
Your position regarding the strengths and weaknesses of unions.
Well, I think that, the unions have their position. I don't always agree with some of the things that they strive for. I think that if you want to join the union, I think that ought to be your right. If you don't want to join, I think that ought to be your right. If we take a look at what's happened through history, we've made a lot of changes over the past several years in many fields and in many areas. One of the areas that there's been hardly any changes in unionization. And I think that the people that work for us, the workers, I think that should be a right. If they want to join the union, I think they ought to have the opportunity to do it. If they don't, I don't think they should have to join it, and I don't think they should be forced to pay the 3% or whatever it is the union dues. Usually it's around 3%. I don't think that they should be forced to pay that.
Mr. Connie?
The Alina nurses strike, I'm glad it's coming to an end. I hope it is coming to an end that is fair to all the people involved. I actually was down there. I actually walked the line with the nurses, not just in the last couple of weeks, but the first time they struck. And I did so because I very much support the union movement within this country. Unions are extremely important to our bottom line as far as workers' wages. Not only that, if you work a 40-hour week, thank a union. If you work a 5-day-a-week job, thank a union. If you do not send your kids to work in factories, thank the unions. There are many things that we can thank unions for, the progress that we have made, and the wages that have been increased because of unions for everybody. By having a union base in a community, it raises the wages for everybody. And going forward, if we do not have strong unions, we end up with a race to the bottom. You end up with people struggling to make ends meet. Their only way of making a reasonable income is to have 2 or 3 jobs within a family. And you don't have the wage scales necessary to have a middle-class income that we have come to enjoy in this country. Unions are very important.
Anything further, Mr.
Yeah, I'd just like to state that there are studies that show some states that have went to not being union or not requiring members to be union, that actually the wages have went up from when they were a union. So that's not true in all cases.
Anything further, Mr. Connie?
You refer to states where they do something where they basically say you don't have to be a part of the union. It's basically union busting. And what that does is it destroys the unions in those states. And what we've seen going forward is that any place where the unions have been busted, you end up with lower and lower wages for everybody.
The next question, are you supporting your party's candidate for president? And Mr. Connie would answer first.
I was a Bernie Sanders supporter in the primaries and was a little disappointed that he didn't get the endorsement. But Hillary Clinton is now my party's endorsed candidate, and I am standing behind her. She will be a fine president. Yeah, she has shown that she is a presidential material, that she has the qualities that we need to lead this country for the next 4 years. As I look at my stand on that, it's not perfect, but it is good. And good is really better than bad. Thank you.
Mr. Dames.
Well, thank you for the question. I certainly don't condone what candidate Trump has done. I don't condone a lot of his attitude. But to be honest with you, I sit here quite shocked that that question would even be asked. And I'll tell you why. We have issues like health care. We have issues with MNsure. I have people that have called me that 2 years ago were paying $10,000 for premium. Today they're paying $30,000. 2 years ago they had a $1,000 deductible. Today they have a $10,000 deductible. They have to come up with $50,000 before they can use the insurance. That's an issue we should be talking about. We haven't spent hardly any time talking about transportation. It's 8:45. That's an issue we should be talking about. We should be talking about money for the handicapped. We should talk about these issues, and the most important issue at this time of the night is how I'm going to vote for the president? I don't believe it. That is unbelievable that that is an issue. That is what's happened from the top down in the DFL party. Hillary Clinton started that. They worked it all the way down. Look at what you see on TV. All you're seeing is ads attacking the Republicans because they're voting or not voting for the I can't believe it. That's my comment on it, and I really think that whoever put that question out owes us an apology.
Anything further, Mr. Connie?
I can tell you're quite upset by that question, Mr. Dames, and rightfully so. You should be upset having somebody with that kind of character at the top of your party. But I have seen you marching in parades with Trump signs right along beside your signs. I have been throughout this whole district where there are Trump signs right alongside Dames signs. This election is about leadership. And if the leadership that you choose for this country is anything that is symptomatic of the leadership that you would have for this state, then I would say we need to disavow all of that kind of leadership.
Yeah, I do want to rebuttal to that. I think that my record in the Senate shows my type of leadership. I think it shows who I am. I think it shows my family values. And for somebody to sit next to me and try to say that if I vote for him, I've got the same values is about as ludicrous as it can possibly come. But like I said, that's the new game in town, is let's not talk about issues, because they don't want to talk about issues, because there's a lot of issues they don't want to talk about. So let's defer the issues and let's talk about Trump. That's really unfortunate.
Mr. Dames would respond first to the following question. Proposals in past legislatures would have limited the ability of local authorities to address potentially harmful or unwanted development proposals. What is your position on limiting local control?
Well, I think that if you have a city council or county commissioners and they want to determine what's best in their development program, I think you need to give them the local control to do that. I don't think that we as a state should come in and start saying you have to do this and you have to do this and you have to do this. However, we have to make sure that when we're doing that and allowing that local control, that we're not trying to block something because of race, color, creed, something like that. It has to be something that may be injurious to the community or may not fit the community or something like that. But I don't think that we should supersede local control.
Mr. Connie?
Local control is very dear to my heart. It's a case where our townships are our base of our democracy. And my opponent actually supported something that directly attacked township local control on something called the manure hose issue, where they talked about whether or not the townships could control whether or not manure hoses could go through the township ditches of their neighbors. And it came down to the fact that whether or not you would allow that or not was basically up to the state then. Well, you are liable if something happens when that hose is going through your ditch. And if that breaks, then you're liable for it's not the person pumping it, it's your land, you're liable. And if a township decides that they don't want that to happen, it should be up to the township. It shouldn't be up to the state. Another issue on local control was the Citizens Board. The Citizens Board was a board made up of the citizens of the state that helped local people have a voice in the doings of their government. And what happened is that board at one point stepped on some toes that they shouldn't have, and it got chopped. It got eliminated because it had stepped on the wrong corporate toes at the wrong time.
Mr. Dames, do you have any further comments?
Yes, I would like to speak on the manure hose situation. I was not on that bill. I was not a co-author. And both parties, both sides came to me because they know that I compromise, they know that I negotiate, and they know that I can get things done. Both the dairy folks and the township folks came to me and asked if I would if they could get me on the conference committee, if I'd be the intermediary to work this thing out. And that's exactly what I did. I came in and I got compromise from both parties. Both parties agreed to it. The townships agreed to it. The dairy folks agreed to it. And the bill was moved forward out of the conference committee. And so if Jim wants to beat me up on that, he can. But again, it shows that I compromise, I get things done, and I know how to put these things together on both sides of the aisle.
Anything further?
The problem is the compromise ended up compromising the townships, and the question here was local control, whether or not the townships should have the primary voice in their area of expertise.
Thank you. It is now close to 9 o'clock, and so it's time to have our closing remarks. We will start with Mr. Dames.
Transportation before then.
Well, thank you, Linda, for moderating this. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. I'd also like to thank the audience and the listeners that are listening to this for you taking time out of your busy evening to be part of this process. We truly appreciate it. I always like to see people get involved. And also, I would like to thank the residents of Senate District 16 for allowing me to serve as your senator for the past 6 years. My record in the Senate shows that I work hard to reach across the aisle, to compromise, and to cooperate, and to get things done. I would appreciate the opportunity to continue to represent Senate District 16 in the Minnesota Senate, and therefore I ask for your vote and would appreciate your support on November 8th.
Thank you. Mr. Connie?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come before you this evening to talk about some of the issues. I am also frustrated that we did not get to talk effectively about transportation. Transportation funding is very dear to my heart. In fact, that we really need a comprehensive transportation package. We also did not talk about health care. Health care is extremely important. In fact, it is the #1 issue right now with the increases in premiums that are being hit at our people at this time. I ask that we go forward, we look at somebody who will be a team player, somebody who will work with you, with your neighbors, with the people who are out there, power that like our city administrators, to get an effective solution to these problems going forward. Thank you for your attention, and I would appreciate your vote on November 8th. And if you have already voted, I thank you for your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, candidates, for your participation tonight, and we appreciate again your willingness to serve as elected officials. Thank you to New Ulm Community Access Television and KNUJ for recording, and to the Journal for partnering with us this year. Thanks to the audience. We hope that you have appreciated the opportunity to learn more about our candidates. And again, if you're interested in League of Women Voters, we would be happy to talk to you about membership. I'd like to thank our volunteers: Ann Wilczek, Harriet Erberg, Teresa Keaveney, Jeannie Hinsman, and Minan Frazier. I would like to let you know that we have some additional events coming. October 17th, next Monday, the City Council Candidate Forum will be here in New Ulm at City Council Chambers at 7 p.m. And October 27th, Thursday, which is a Thursday, will be the County Commissioner Forum, also here in City Council Chambers at 7 p.m. Thank you again, and don't forget to vote.